Welcome back to Coffee and Cartridges. Today we're going to compare the 30-06 to everything. Stay tuned. Today in 2024 we have a lot of new cartridges coming out. They're really cool cartridges, and they have some modern touches to them. Generally speaking, they're focused and geared around higher BC, heavier bullets for longer range. That seems to be the trend. But we have some excellent cartridges coming out, but we've had excellent cartridges that have been around for over 100 years. And I see it in my comments all the time. We have the one group is mad that when any new cartridge comes out, they're mad because they feel like the cartridges that they adore and have used for a long time is just as good and doesn't need to be replaced. And I understand that. And then you have another group that feels like if it's a cartridge made before the 6.5 Creedmoor, then it doesn't need to exist. It's obsolete. I understand that, though I disagree with it completely. I love new cartridges. I have bragged on the 7 PRC. I have bragged on the 300 WSM. I like the 6mm Creedmoor quite a bit. There's a lot of new cartridges that I like. And I get excited every time a new cartridge comes out. So I'm not a person that doesn't want new cartridges. I want more. It's fun for me to talk about and learn about. But there's a lot of old cartridges that have been doing it for a long time. And today we're going to talk about one of those that has been doing it for well over 100 years. All right, so today I'm going to talk about the old 30-06. First, I'm going to take you down a journey and show you a little bit of the history of the 30-06, but also many opportunities that cartridges had to knock it off and kind of show how it's still around today, and not just around today, but show you how it's extremely viable, relevant, and still performs excellent for pretty much any hunting application that you want to use it for in our modern day. The cartridge discussions are fun. They're meant to be fun. So hopefully nobody will take offense by this. If you were to ask me to debate any cartridge, I could do it. And it wouldn't matter if I was going for it or against it. You could debate the merits of any cartridge. And any cartridge is going to be suitable for a specific type of application. So one person might think the 30-06 is the greatest cartridge of all time for their needs. Another person might think it's the 7mm Rim Mag for their needs. So of course it depends on your application and the criteria in which you judge it in and what you're looking for in a cartridge. But it's much more fun to have an opinion, right? Have a take on something. And so my takes today are the 30-06 is immortal. It cannot be killed. There has never been a cartridge, even to this very day, took its place. No cartridge has taken the place of the 30-06. The 30-06, of course, was developed by the United States government, and they basically just took the 7mm Mauser round, which in the Mauser 98 had just, kind of outperformed them and outperformed our troops in the Spanish-American War with our trapdoor Springfields and 30-40 Kriegs. Even though we won that war, we kind of got outperformed by that rifle and that cartridge. So we decided to, if you can't beat them, copy them. So we created a new rifle, the 1903 Springfield, which extremely similar to the Mauser 98. And we took that 7mm Mauser round that we had seen in the Spanish-American War, simply elongated it, gave it more capacity for powder, changed the shoulder angle slightly, gave it actually a little bit longer neck, even though the neck of the 7mm Mauser was quite long, even a little bit longer neck, and of course necked it up to 30 caliber. And that's our 30-06 government round, created in that Springfield Armory. Now of course we developed the 1903 first, thinking of it shooting really heavy cylindrical round nose bullets. 3 years later, we changed our philosophy, called it the 30-06, and geared it more toward 150 grain Spitzer bullet, going much faster. Now the cartridges that were around and relevant in 1906 compared till today is much different, and not as many. There had been dramatic, improvements in the last 20 years at that time. We had went to smokeless powder, we went to Spitzer bullets, both kind of invented and pushed by the French. But now all the new cartridges across the world, the new government military rounds across the world, had Spitzer bullets, had smokeless powder, and we had already had that in our civilian world with a 30-30, even the 30-40 Krag. But just the overall design and using the most up-to-date technology of that time and innovations, we come out with this awesome cartridge. Now, of course, one thing about the 30-06 that is so awesome about it is its history. 10 years after it was created, we're in World War I, and it's the United States military cartridge with that 1903 Springfield rifle. You fast forward till the early 40s, and of course we are pushed by the Japanese into World War II, and we still have that 1903 Springfield, but we also come out with the M1 Garand, and both rifles, of course, chambered in 30-06. The 1903 Springfield became more of a sniper rifle, and then our main battle rifle became the M1 Garand. So through 2 world wars, the 30-06, was America's cartridge. Let's talk about some of the children of the 30-06. Now, the obvious ones are just simply when we neck it up or neck it down. You neck it down to 6.8 millimeter, you have the 270 Winchester. You neck it down to 25 caliber, got the 25-06. You neck it to 7 millimeter, you got the 280. You neck it up to 338, you got the 338-06. You neck it up to 35 caliber, you got the 35 Wayland. And I skipped the 6.5-06 A square as well. So just simply necking it up, necking it down creates a lot of awesome cartridges. And the 270 in particular is extremely popular, has a unbelievable following, has been just as successful as a 30-06 in the hunting world, and it's just simply a neck down 30-06. But many other cartridges, though they're not directly children to that 30-06 parent case, kind of came from that. The 250 3000 Savage and the 300 Savage took the head diameter and just kind of the basic philosophy of the case design of the 30-06 and the 7mm Mauser and created their own little bit shorter cartridge family. Even the 308, same head diameter as the 30-06 and the 7mm Mauser, changed it up a little bit, kind of playing off of what the 300 Savage did, but yet going back to that 30-06, just a more efficient, shorter version. So all the cartridges from the 308 family, in an indirect way, also come from the 30-06. There are 2 cartridges that you might not think of that do kind of come from the 30-06, and that's the 50 BMG and the 222 Remington. Now, they're obviously not a direct, child of the parent 30-06, but you look at the dimensions. Now, they're not 100% exact, but they're very close. More or less, a 50 BMG developed by John Browning is simply a scaled up 30-06. And the 222 Remington is simply a scaled down 30-06. The 222 Remington, of course, spawned the 223, which is still around today and become extremely popular. The 222 Magnum, which later spawned the 204 Ruger. In fact, it is kind of the standard. When you think of a long action cartridge or a standard action cartridge, 30-06 is literally the standard. 3.340 maximum overall length of the cartridge is what that 30-06 is. And so many cartridges today just simply copy that. The 7 Rim Mag, the 300 Win Mag, both, obviously wanted to have more case capacity, be a more powerful Magnum, yet stayed within those limits of 3.340 to fit in that standard 30-06 length action. So to a degree, even the standard action goes back to the 30-06. Though it obviously had military success, so to speak, And obviously it also had success in like Wimbledon matches and long-range target shooting. That really wasn't where it met its true, application. And that application became known as hunting. And people all across the world, especially in North America, have used the 30-06 as a hunting cartridge for well over 100 years. But now I guess the main point of this video is to fast forward to the year 2024. And my opinion is to tell you it's still viable, it's still relevant, it's still an awesome cartridge, still widely available, common, and it's still darn good. It's not obsolete, it's not becoming obsolete. I think at this point it cannot be obsolete. I believe it's immortal. And we're gonna, once again, back up and go through some cartridges that should have knocked it off, or at least had the potential to knock it off. So for example, before we do that, in our modern day, 7PRC has just came out. A lot of people are saying give it 5 to 10 years and the 7mm Remington Magnum is going to become obsolete, because a lot of people, including myself, view the 7PRC as just more of a modernized, perhaps improvement upon the 7 Rem Mag. And so the logical conclusion to many would be it's going to overtake it, going to become more popular, and the 7 Rem Mag is going to go by the wayside. Now, I don't agree with that. I think both cartridges are going to be popular for a long time. But it's true, we have seen cartridges come on the scene that do something just simply better than a previous cartridge, and then the previous cartridge declines in popularity and eventually stops getting chambered by rifle manufacturers, and ammo manufacturers stop producing factory ammo for it, and it becomes a dead cartridge. It's happened many, many times. All right, so the 300 Savage was that first one that I can think of that when it came out, it was, it had become this marketing campaign of its less recoil, shorter, more compact, more modern, efficient version of a 30-06 in our Model 99 Savage lever action rifle. And it's duplicating the performance, or at least close to the 30-06. And it really is just that more handier, better solution for your hunting needs. And though I do really like the 300 Savage, great rifle, great cartridge, it nowhere near was equal to the power of the 30-06. So the Savage didn't really do a whole lot to the 30-06, though it was a cool cartridge. Around 1925, they also come out with a 300 Holland & Holland, or the Super 30. Now this cartridge is just a 375 Holland & Holland neck down to 30 caliber. It is a Magnum length cartridge, unlike the 300 Savage being a little shorter. It's a Magnum length cartridge, and it is a step up from a 30-06. It's going to have more case capacity, simply going to push the same bullet a little faster. It became very popular, and in fact, it has spawned an enormous, the 375 and the 300 have spawned an enormous family of cartridges. Pretty much every Magnum cartridge until here recently with these Hornady cartridges have basically all come from either the 404 Jeffrey, the 416 Rigby, or the 375 H&H. But the majority of those, and the most commercially successful ones, and you'll notice because they have the belt on them, come from that 300 H&H or the 375. So the 300 is a Magnum level 30 caliber cartridge that has become very successful, and its children have become very successful. It didn't put a dent in the 30-06's popularity. Even the 270 in that same year, 1925, it might not have took off as quickly, but it has become just as popular as the 30-06. But its extreme popularity hasn't put a dent in the 30-06. They are different calibers, of course, but they're still doing the same thing. They're a hunting cartridge for medium to big game across the world. Didn't put a dent. So move ahead to the 50s. Okay, you've got, let's just say we have a more efficient, shorter 30 caliber cartridge, but a little bit better and a little bit better design than the 300 Savage with a little bit more power. Can it be done? Well, it was done, the 308 Winchester. And even though it successfully did replace the 30-06 in military applications, it didn't replace the 30-06 in hunting. Now the 308 not only like the 270 is just as popular as the 30-06, the 308 became more popular. You literally had a 30 caliber cartridge, very similar ballistics and performance, not quite as much, but very similar, more efficient, and it literally is much more popular than the 30-06 to this very day. And the 30-06 is still alive and well. I mean, that right there should have told you there is no killing this cartridge. All right, what about the 60s? Well, there's two cartridges. One cartridge came out in 1962, the 7mm Remington Magnum. It was marketed really nicely as being as flat shooting as the 270 and having as much energy as the 30-06, and it really did do that. It is on the same level of popularity as the 270. It is known worldwide as a great hunting cartridge. Even to this day, it's very popular. But it didn't put a dent in the 30-06. Maybe a dent, but it sure didn't kill it, not even close. The very next year, Winchester, to meet that incredible popularity of the Remington cartridge, came out with a 300 Win Mag. 300 Win Mag, of course, is very similar to the 300 H&H, just a little bit more modern, a little bit more powder capacity, not as tapered on the sides of that wall of that cartridge. So really it's just a more modern and powerful version of the 300 H&H. And I kind of even skipped one. The 300 Weatherby Magnum had been out since the 40s, and it was just a Magnum length 30 caliber cartridge. So it didn't seem like any Magnum that came out had any influence on the 30-06. The 300 Weatherby, the 300 H&H, very popular, very capable. 30-06 is still around. 300 Win Mag, like the 308, like the 270, like the 7mm Rim Mag, has become unbelievably successful worldwide. Popularity is off the charts. And in fact, when you think of the #1 hunting cartridge in the world, probably the winner would be the 300 Win Mag if you just polled hunters across the world on all continents. But the 30-06 is still around. It's still going just fine. And then of course you had our 30 caliber short magnums, the RCM, the WSM, the Psalm. None of these cartridges did anything. They're like the same performance as the 300 Win Mag, but maybe a little bit less, and then in a more efficient package. Really cool cartridges. I really like them. 30-06 still around. All right, so if that doesn't tell you that there is no way that you can kill the 30-06, it is immortal. It cannot be killed, and it never will be killed. But now here's the thing. A lot of you are going to watch this and say, well, it's just because it was America's cartridge in the World Wars. It's just because of the nostalgia. But you've named so many cartridges that are better than the 30-06. And it's really just for people's nostalgia and the history of it. That's the only reason that it's still around. Well, that is part of it. The availability, I mean, it's still available. You can go to the store right now, get 30-06 ammo, and you can do that pretty much anywhere in the world. So it's still available. And yes, it has a tremendous history. That's all viable. That's all part of it. I guess the point of this video is to tell you it still, to this day, its performance warrants it to exist. It's still excellent. It hasn't diminished. It's not obsolete. It is still a great cartridge ballistically. And we're going to talk about that now. So, why has this 30-06 never died? What about it keeps it going? Well, first of all, it is versatile, okay? A 30 caliber is versatile because of how the market has produced ammo and reloading components. It is versatile. From 110 grain bullet up to 220, 230-ish grain bullets. Extremely versatile. But that would go with any 30 caliber Magnum too. You could shoot the same bullet. So that in itself isn't enough. The 30 caliber is just an extremely versatile caliber. You could argue there's other calibers that are just as versatile. And within 30 caliber, you could argue other cartridges are just as versatile. So it's not just the versatility of bullet weights, but it's the balance point, and I'll explain that. So if you get a reloading manual and you go to 308, it's probably going to go from 110 bullet to 180, maybe up to 190, 200, maybe. And I do know F-class shooters will shoot those really heavy bullets, like 200 grain, but for the most part, 180 is the limit of a 308. You go to the reloading manual for 30-06, it's definitely going to go up to 220, probably. Now, technically, both cartridges, you could put a 220 grain bullet in both cartridges. But the thing with the shorter 30 caliber cartridges, 308, 30-30, 300 Savage, they're just too short for those heavier bullets. If you put that heavy of a bullet, it's going to be really long, of course, and it's simply going to take up so much case capacity that you're not going to get anywhere close to the velocity that you would want. Now, there is an extreme opposite end of this where if you were shooting it, like a 300 blackout, and you're fully okay with it being very slow, in fact, you might want it to be subsonic, then I guess you could find a use for it. But if you're wanting it to be deadly at least medium range distances, you're going to have that bullet having velocity. And so you're better off to get a lighter bullet in those cartridges. And lighter bullets in a 30-06 also work really nice. 130 to 165 grain bullets, even 180, are really nice. But you can easily shoot the 200, 220, maybe even 225 grain bullets easily in a 30-06. One, it's just a standard length action versus a short action. You just simply have more room in the case for that bullet, but it also has a really long neck, And so a lot of the dimensions of that bullet and that length of that bullet is within the neck. And so a 30-06 is way more versatile than a 308, especially because of the heavier bullets. And I will say something about the difference between 308 and 30-06 here. When you're shooting factory ammo, especially like say a 150 grain bullet, there's not going to be a ton of difference between the two. One, because that 150 grain bullet is just not taking up as much case capacity, and so the difference in case capacities is not quite as big, and the 308 is a very efficient round. But also the 308 is just not as old, okay? It only goes back to the 50s versus 1906. And it has a little bit higher pressure rating, 62,000 versus 60,000. So when manufacturers make factory ammo for the 30-06, they have it in their mind what rifles you might be shooting. And knowing you could be shooting a Springfield rifle from 1906, is it going to be able to hold up with higher pressures? Maybe, maybe not. And so just because you could be shooting much older rifles and the pressure rating is a little bit lower, you're not going to see as dramatic of a difference in factory ammo. But that's another thing about the 30-06, it's a hand loader's dream. When reloading with the 30-06, you can get those extremely heavy bullets if you want. You can get extremely light bullets if you want, and it's going to work out. But you're not hampered by that kind of lawyer proofing that comes along with the factory ammo. And you know the rifle you have, and you know the pressure that you can get out of it. So you're not going to have to be as cautious as the ammo manufacturers are. So you can get actually a significant amount of difference between the 30-06 and the 308 when you're hand loading. Now, going back to the heavy bullets, you might say, yeah, but if you're shooting one of the Magnum 30 calibers, you can shoot those heavy bullets just fine. And you have much more case capacity, so they're going to be shot a lot faster. So you compare a 300 Win Mag to a 30-06. No doubt, they can both shoot the heaviest bullets, and the 300 Win Mag is going to shoot it probably a couple hundred feet per second faster than the 30-06. No question. But it goes back to recoil and efficiency. Just like the 308 is more efficient than the 30-06, the 30-06 is a little bit more efficient than the 300 Win Mag. And so yes, you're going to shoot that bullet faster, but at what cost? Well, a little bit more powder being burned and not as efficiently, so diminishing returns there, and a significant step up in recoil. Now there's going to be a lot of people that watch this and say, oh, recoil of a 300 Win Mag isn't bad at all. You know, whatever the case. But the majority of people don't want a lot of recoil if they can get close to that performance with less. So the 30 caliber just reaches a good balance point. It can outperform the shorter 30 caliber cartridges, and it's more versatile than those cartridges. And it can do almost as much as the 30 caliber Magnums with less recoil and less powder being burned. So of course, if you like the 30-06 but you want more power, there's plenty of options, plenty of cartridges that can give you that to you. If you like the 30-06 but you want to get a really short, like an 18-inch barrel, and you're okay with it being, you know, less velocity, you just want a more efficient case, then something like a 308 would be perfect. But you'll always come back to that 30-06 being like the standard, being like the balance point, and being that kind of middle ground. A middle ground that works for everybody, that just seems to be appealing to all the masses, you know, in the gun world and in the hunting world. And that's why it's relevant. It's just that middle ground. It might not be the best cartridge for any one thing, and there might even be cartridges that are better all around, but it sets the standard. It is the balance point that everything works off of. Let's just compare it to the 270. Both are excellent hunting cartridges. One, I've already established, is more versatile. If you shoot the same grain bullet, 150 grain bullet, the 30-06 is going to shoot it a little faster. 130 grain bullet out of both. The 30 caliber will be a little faster, but the flip side is you'll have a higher BC with the 270. And that applies to all cartridges. It would apply if you compared the 30-06 to the 35 Whelen. 35 Whelen would shoot the same grain bullet faster. 30-06 would shoot that same grain bullet with higher BC. That's just the physics of ballistics. That doesn't change. So you can get ultra flat, ultra fast trajectories out of both cartridges. And you know, you shoot something like an 80 or 90 grain 270 bullet, it's going to be unbelievably fast. At the high end, which in the manuals, the high end for the 270 is around 150, maybe 160 grains. Now, I've even proved on my channel that you can shoot heavier bullets, and depending on your elevation and the conditions, you might be able to stabilize up to 170 grain bullet. But, you know, on the coast in Alaska, you're not going to see that. So typically it'll end around 150 grain bullet, and it'll have a decent BC, but you can get up to a 225 grain ELD match bullet in a 30 caliber that's going to have a BC of 777. So the 30 caliber is way more versatile. And of course that 30-06, like we talked about, is really geared for them heavier bullets. But depending on your application, you might be hunting whitetails. 130 grain TTSX is going to be unbelievable. You know, 150 grain AccuBond, it's going to be screaming and going to be great for, you know, whitetail deer hunting. So the 30-06, in my opinion, this is going to garner some comments, I'm sure, is just simply better than the 270. That doesn't take away from the 270, but that's why the 30-06 has been this good for this long. Compare the 30-06 to the 308, which is better. I personally absolutely adore both cartridges. If I had to give the very slightest edge for one, it would be the 30-06. I'd say 30-06 slightly beats a 308 just in versatility. 300 Win Mag versus 30-06, which one wins? Well, of course it depends. If you're wanting the best trajectory, the most velocity, the most energy, you're going to easily get that with a 300 Win Mag. But if you want something that's pretty darn similar, close to the 300 Win Mag, using less powder and a lot less recoil, you know, 30-06 is just fine. 30-06, in my opinion, is just, it always comes to mind. When you think about different species that you want to hunt, it just seems like 30-06 will always come up in every conversation. If you're thinking about out west and you're wanting to hunt antelope, you know, it might not be your first thought You know, you might think of something like a 243 or a 6.5 or a 270. But then you think, you know, a little heavier bullet, a little bit bigger hole, that 30-06 could be just fine. When you're thinking about whitetail deer, you know, you could easily shoot a 6.5 Creedmoor, a 308, a 243, and you can do just fine. But is the 30-06 like tremendously, you know, overdoing it? No, not at all. In fact, you can load it up, load it down. You can get lighter bullets, heavier bullets. You can easily match the application. Now, a 300 Win Mag on a whitetail deer at fairly close range, it does seem like you're overdoing it. 30-06, nah. If you're stepping up to an elk, I would say a 30-06 is just a little bit better than a 308. Randy Newberg kills an awful lot of elk with his 308. Sure, there's bigger cartridges that might be better for elk, more ideal. That 30-06 will work just fine. And of course, depending on your distance, but within reasonable ethical distances, that 30-06 is just about right with like that 180 grain bullet, 200 grain bullet, even 165 grain bullet, depending on the bullet construction. You're not going to go wrong. You know, it might not be ideal again for moose, but my goodness, you could do just fine with a 30-06. Once again, it's so versatile, you can match the application with that bullet weight, with that bullet construction. And yes, you could do that with other cartridges, but a lot more powder, a lot more recoil. It really can fit the bill in whatever you want. It would not be my recommendation for brown bear or any kind of dangerous game, but it definitely could do it. I think it might be the absolute best cartridge for black bear. Most people will tell you just use your deer rifle for black bear. But, you know, it's still a bear, and it's a big animal. I would think that 30 caliber would be just a little bit bigger bullet, causing a little bit bigger entry wound, exit wound. I think it would be just about ideal as a black bear cartridge. You could always say there's a better cartridge for a specific application, and you could be right, you could be wrong. But the 30-06 is never a bad choice. So getting back to the 30-06 being a reloader's cartridge, similar to like a 7mm Mauser, you know, or something like that, a really old cartridge that because it's old and because its pressure rating is not the highest, factory ammo is going to be a little bit tampered down. But with, you know, custom loads, custom reloads, my goodness, you can get amazing reloads and hand loads from a 30-06. We've already talked about the range and bullet weights, but it also is just easy to load for. So many different powders work for it. You know, powders like 4064 up to even some slower burning powders will work just fine. You know, your 4350 powders, your big game, your hunter powders, the new 6.5 stay ball powder are pretty darn good. With those lighter bullets, you might want to go down to like IMR 4064. But you've got so much potential there, and so many powders work for the 30-06. You're going to have to get a really slow burning powder or a really fast burning powder to get one that doesn't really work for the 30-06. Let's talk about barrel length for a second. Now, the 30-06 is not an overbore cartridge. And what that means is it's just for the diameter of its bore, which is the diameter of the bullet, and how much powder that it has behind that bullet, it's just not overbore. And so a 270, of course, would be more overbore because it's the same amount of powder in a smaller hole. 25-06 would be much more overbore. And so the difference is your bore is getting smaller, 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 which means less volume. There's just not as much room in there to burn all that powder. And therefore, with an overbore cartridge with a lot of powder, you're going to have to extend that barrel length. And so with a 25-06 or a 270 even, I think you really need a 24-inch barrel. You can get away with it. You can do just fine with a 22, but really I think you should be going for a longer barrel length because it's an overbore cartridge and there's just not as much volume in that barrel. But that 30 caliber, even with a 22-inch barrel, there's just as much volume or more volume than it would be with, say, a 24-inch or 26-inch barrel in a 25-06. So it's much easier to get away with a shorter barrel in a 30 caliber. A 308, of course, you know, even a 20-inch barrel, an 18-inch barrel, as long as you understand you're going to lose a little bit of velocity, it's not as bad because of the volume. Now, of course, that can be applied to a 338 or a 35 caliber. They have even more, you know, volume in there. Point being, even though you'll still get more velocity with a longer barrel, probably 25, you know, feet per second per inch, it's not quite as necessary to have a longer barrel in a 30-06 because it's just simply has the volume in there, and it just simply works with so many different powders that you don't have to have that longer barrel length. The 30-06 has a great barrel life because it's not overbore. It's not quite as good as a 308, but much better than, say, a 300 Weatherby. Once again, it's that balance point between, you know, short action cartridges and Magnum cartridges. It's that it sets the standard. And so there's really nothing negative about it. For some people, it could be a little much. The recoil might be a little much. Shooting like a 180 grain bullet out of a 30-06 does have some recoil. And for that person, you might want to get a 308, or you might want to get a 6.5 Creedmoor. You might want to get something, you know, that's not going to kick as hard. For other people, it's not a big deal at all. They're used to shooting big Weatherby cartridges or big Magnum cartridges. But once again, the 30-06 is that balance point. And so that's why it never dies. It's because you always go back to the standard. You always go back to the balance point, and it's always going to be appealing to somebody. Maybe it's not appealing to you, but someone's going to find it appealing because the whole ballistic world and the whole cartridge selection world revolves around that 30-06. And it's better than ever. You take some nice Lapua brass, you get some match grade primers, you get some of this new Stay-Ball or this Hodgdon powder that's temperature insensitive. You get some of these cutting edge bullets, whether it's some of these nice Barnes or any company's monolithic bullets, or some of these really nice Terminal Ascent or Bond Strike bonded bullets, these AccuBonds. There's so many awesome bullets, you know, that you can use, and so many awesome components. The 30-06 would work for anything that you want to do with it. If someone told me you can only have one rifle for the rest of your life, and it has to be a 30-06, you have no choice, I wouldn't feel undergunned. I wouldn't feel underwhelmed. I would feel like I have exactly what I need, and I can do anything that I want to do in the hunting world. That's why it's immortal. And that's why it beats everything. You guys, I'm sure I'm going to have some comments on this one, and some agree, some disagree. It's okay. Please leave your comments below. What's your experience with 30-06? How do you feel it compares to modern cartridges and older cartridges? Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this video if you feel like it's worth sharing. Check the description below. There's several links that you might want to check out. Hopefully you have a wonderful day, and until next time, take care.